Hello, my name is Jude Williams. I go to Limerick Valley Grammar School and I live in Killywill. Before we even move on to the main subject of today, I'd like to say how lucky we all are to be here. Just to be born is a 1 in 400 trillion chance. So that shows how privileged we are to be here. Another thing I personally have is ginger hair. So that is prevalent in a 1 to 2% of the world population. So if you add that to statistics, that is a 1 in 40,000 trillion chance of being born. And finally, I have something called auditory processing disorder. So imagine the human brain is connected by straight strings of spaghetti. In a normal human brain, it goes back and forth just fine. But in my brain, it's almost like spaghetti junction. So messages get confused, and it takes me slightly longer to respond. So and this increases if there's a lot of visual or noise stimulations, and my brain really begins to struggle. So the main thing I want to do today is to give a toolbox, particularly for people of my generation and teenagers of my age, just on how to survive the next couple of years, and maybe even beyond that as well. And the acronym I'm going to be using is Ginger, because this. So G is for grind. I want you to close your eyes and imagine you're at the NI Cross Country Championships final. The day was absolutely terrible, and because it was snowing that day, and because the day before it had been raining, the puddles had frozen over. It was that cold, and the pens the running pens we were in were under a metre wide, so I was getting elbowed from all sides, and our school, which by the way had for the very first, was the first time being in the finals of the NI Cross Country Championships, had one very good runner and 2 other good runners. So soon the starting gun went, and about 3 yards off the line, I get spiked and my shoe comes off, followed by a lot of blood coming out of my foot. So I had one of 2 options here: either sit down, probably have a little cry, or grind it out for the next 1.6 kilometers. And ultimately, I decided to choose the latter option. So for 1.6 kilometers with one very bloody foot and one shoe on, I eventually finished 8th for that overall. And that day, we won the NI Cross Country Championships final. So it's always important to remember, it's not about who wins the first 20 meters of a race, or even indeed the first 100 meters. It's about who wins at the end of the day and who wins overall. This brings me on to my next letter. I. I is for the individual. Another notable thing about particularly my generation's life in the 21st century is the constant use for social media to base on how they look, how they talk to people, how they dress, even how they make friends. But to me, it's never really been that important. I don't have any Snapchat accounts, and because of my auditory processing disorder, I often find myself on my own. But that's what I enjoy about myself. I don't even need company to be happy. So if particularly people of my age, and indeed even my peers, moved away from the dopamine hits in social media, it could be incredibly beneficial to them in the long term. This brings me on to my next letter. N. N is for nurture. Another thing our generation has to prepare for is we also have to prepare to nurture the next generation of people that come to this planet. But also in the current day, we also have to indeed nurture our colleagues and peers, no matter where they would be. So, which is another N. Nice. Just be nice to people, because, as I said slightly earlier, it's just a 1 in 400 trillion chance of just being born, and I think we should all be thankful to each other because of that. This can be closely linked to my next letter, G. G is for gratitude. Another thing our generation generally lacks is just sometimes the simple things, such as please or thank you. And I want everybody in this audience, no matter whether that be at home or indeed here today, to at least say thank you, please or thank you to one person today. Because it can be because saying thank you to someone can change their whole day, and possibly in some circumstances their whole year. E is for energy. Another thing, although you've probably heard of our generation's Generations stay in longer, one hour longer in the morning, 1 hour up later at night. Our generation has more energy than any other generation on this planet. So if we're given a task and truly commit to it, we can achieve anything. So I'd say our generation, instead of telling or asking other people to change stuff, I believe we should go out and change it ourselves because we have the energy to do so. And if we truly focus and channel our energy into our goals, it can be incredible. It can most certainly be achieved. This brings us on to my last letter, R. R is for relentless. Another thing our generation does, it's sometimes, some people just sometimes give up just too easily. So I do many open water swimming and triathlon events around Northern Ireland and indeed Ireland and around the world. And one of the things that keeps just going through my head is just to keep going. So one of the differences between, say, swimming compared to, say, cycling or running is that during sports such as cycling or running, you can always stop, whether that be on the pavement or indeed in a ditch. But when you're swimming, you cannot. It is not. If you stop, you're finished. The lifeboat may or may not see you. Quite recently, I did a swim in Loch Earn, and it was 3 kilometers long. And the conditions that day were not particularly great. The water was freezing, and even though I was wearing a wetsuit, it was almost like the Baltic Sea. What kept going through my head was just to be relentless. And so for 3 kilometers, after 3 kilometers, I eventually finished the swim. And that day overall, I managed to do 29 kilometers over the course of the cycle and run and swim combined. So it's always important to remember, although it may not seem apparent then, if you truly stick to something and remain relentless at and relentlessly commit to it, the rewards at the end of the day can be incredibly rewarding at the end of the day. So I believe today I've given a good toolbox for people of my generation to follow. And if people followed this, they can at least be the best person they can be. And another thing I believe is we need more people to join the Gingers and become one of the Gingers. I was Jude Williams, and I thank you for listening.